Hello, boys and girls. My name is Mr. Fox, and I'm here at Linda Elementary School. And today I'm going to read a book to you entitled Picture the Past: Life on the Oregon Trail, written by Sally Senzell Isaacs. Paragraph title is A Long Journey West. Before 1840, most Americans lived east of the Mississippi River. They lived on farms or in towns. Some brave explorers traveled west. They brought back stories of wide open free land. They also told of the Native Americans who had been living on the land for many, many years. In the 1840s, thousands of people traveled the Oregon Trail to Oregon. These pioneers left friends and homes behind them. They spent 4 to 6 months walking across America. When the book allows us to, we're going to look at the timeline of events in the time of the Oregon Trail. Starting with the 1800s, the U.S. doubled its size by buying the Louisiana Purchase from France. In 1803 to 1806, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark explored western land to the Pacific Ocean. In 1836, Narcissia Whitman and Eliza Spaulding became the first white women to travel the Oregon Trail. In 1843, some 1,000 men, women, and children leaving Independence, Missouri on the Oregon Trail, they arrived in Oregon 5 months later. The Oregon Trail started in Independence, Missouri. It was 2,000 miles, 3,200 kilometers long. Families came there from many places. They wanted to travel in large groups. Some people split off the Oregon Trail at the Snake River and took the California Trail to Sacramento, California. More on the timeline. In 1846, agreement with Great Britain gives Oregon Territory to the United States. In 1849, California gold rush begins. Thousands more people head west. In 1859, Oregon becomes a state. In 1860, first Pony Express rider brings mail to the western settlers. And in 1861, the Civil War began in the states east of the Mississippi River. In 1869, the Transcontinental Railroad is completed. Now people can ride trains from coast to coast. A new chapter titled Leaving Home. Every May, the town of Independence in Missouri was filled with excitement and tears. Dozens of families came from towns far and near. They each brought a wagon filled with their most important belongings and with cooking equipment to use on the trail. Everyone had said goodbye to relatives, friends, teachers, and homes. The early part of the Oregon Trail crossed flat plains. It was too dangerous to travel the trail alone. People joined together in a wagon train. And here is an artist rendition of that wagon train. You can see cowboys. You can see the Conestoga wagons led by oxen. They're heading out on the trail. In Missouri, people bought wagons, wheels, canvas, ropes, and other supplies before they started the trip. You can see them loading up the wagons with all the things they're going to need. These families were joining a wagon train to Oregon country. They all had dreams of getting free land, building new houses, and starting new farms. They gave up almost everything to follow this dream. The trip was long and hard. On the Oregon Trail, the family had to drive their wagons across plains and rivers and over the Rocky Mountains. The chapter says, "The wagon." Strong oxen pulled the wooden wagons. A wagon was a little smaller than today's minivan. The sides were about 3 feet, 1 meter high. A white canvas cloth covered the wagon. The cloth kept out the wind and the rain. What to take? For the trip: water buckets, ropes, canvas, food, lanterns, blankets, pans, rifles, tents, pens, and paper. For the new home: tools, seeds, spinning wheels, family photographs. Here's our wagon. They're loading up their stuff. Families also brought cows for milk, chickens for eggs, and sheep for wool. Some also brought horses to ride on. Here's a picture of a wagon. The wagon was fully loaded with belongings. There was little room for people to ride inside. Sometimes a sick person or a grandparent sat in the wagon. Sometimes mothers with babies rode inside. A few people rode on horseback. Everyone else walked. Today at Scott Bluff, Nebraska, you can see a copy of a wagon on the Oregon Trail. The title of this is Following the Trail. Hundreds of years ago, Native Americans traveled over parts of the Oregon Trail. Their feet wore paths along rivers and between mountains. The first white pioneers could hardly see these paths. After a few years, wagon wheels made the trail wider and easier to follow. The Oregon Trail crossed rivers and steep mountains. It also ran through land where Native Americans lived. Look at that picture. Look at those mountains. And over here, do you see them? There's a couple of Indians watching what's going on. Passing pioneers carved their names and the date on rocks along the trail. This helped others to find their way. Travelers started the trip in May when there was plenty of fresh spring grass for the animals to eat. Travelers who started late faced great danger. Snowstorms hit the Rocky Mountains in October. Everybody had to cross the mountains before it snowed. This page is titled The Daily Routine. The wagon stopped every night for the pioneers and animals to eat and rest. At 4 o'clock in the morning, someone blew a bugle. It was time to wake up. Women started a campfire and cooked breakfast. Children rounded up the animals and milked the cows. Men took down the tents and checked the wagons. Sunrise to sunset. 4 a.m., wake up and eat breakfast. 7 a.m., start moving along the trail. 12 noon, eat lunch and feed the animals. 6 p.m., stop for the night and make a campfire. Travelers looked for landmarks like Chimney Rock in Nebraska to show how far they had traveled. Do you see the Chimney Rock right there? That's going to tell them how far they went that day. Some days were just boring. For 11 hours, the wagon rolled over dusty, flat plains. But there were plenty of exciting days. When the wagon reached a deep stream, the ox became scared. The people had to pull the animals through the water. They floated the wagons. Everyone swam across. The front wagon kicked up a lot of dust. Every family wanted their wagon in the front so they wouldn't have to breathe the dust. Usually people took turns in front. Look at these people here. They're pouring dirt out of their shoes. This page is titled Night on the Trail. As soon as the wagon stopped, boys helped their fathers fix broken wheels and taking care of the animals. Girls helped their mothers cook supper and mend clothes. Some men and boys took turns to stay awake by the campfire. They were guards against wild animals and Native Americans who tried to steal their animals. Toward the end of the day, guides rode ahead of the wagon train to find a good place to stop for the night. There they are. It's getting evening time, and the guides are already riding ahead, checking out for the campsite. At night, the travelers formed a circle with their wagons. People felt safe to see everyone around them. Usually, each family ate by their own wagon. Some families got together by a campfire to share stories and play music or celebrate a birthday. Most people slept in their tents. Some slept inside the wagon on top of boxes. This chapter is entitled Children on the Trail. Children had responsibilities such as helping their parents, watching younger brothers and sisters, and looking after animals. As the wagon rolled along, children ran up and down the trails. They played games with their friends. They picked wild flowers and made necklaces. They peered across the plains to search for prairie dog towns and buffalo herds. Parents brought books and slates in the wagon. Some children practiced reading and writing every day. All children learn special lessons never taught in school. They learned how to listen for the sound of a rattlesnake. They learned to tell a coyote's call from a wolf howl. How would you feel? Some children loved camping out every night and waking up to a brand new adventure. Other children did not like living with strange people and sights. For some, the quiet nights were very scary. Here's a family on the trail. A couple of girls, boys, dad, baby sitting on dad's lap. The title of this page is Native Americans. The Oregon Trail ran right through Native American land. Native Americans had lived on this land for thousands of years. The wagon trains looked frightening to them. The pioneers were also afraid of the Native Americans. Sometimes Native Americans attacked the wagon trains. They were trying to protect their land. You can see the Indians attacking this wagon. The natives closely watched the pioneers. Sometimes they showed the pioneers hidden paths across the Rocky Mountains. Fair trading. Here are some things that were traded between Native Americans and pioneers. Native American things: buffalo skins, fresh meat, smoked fish. Pioneer things: wool blankets, smoked fish, sewing needles, pancakes. Most Native Americans were helpful. They used their boats to take pioneers across rivers. They helped the travelers find food. However, from the 1850s onward, some pioneers stayed at places along the Oregon Trail and built their homes and fences on the land. The United States government made the Native Americans leave. This page is titled Dangers. Pioneers faced dangerous weather all along the trip. Thunderstorms swept across the plains. Then came the hot, dry desert with its swarming flies. Most of all, the pioneers feared a snowstorm in the mountain. That is why they hurried to get through the mountains before winter. Snowstorms were deadly. Pioneers lost the trail. With no grass to eat, many animals died. There are pioneers caught in a snowstorm. It would be a very, very difficult winter. Mountain trails were narrow and rocky. Often wagon wheels hit a rock and could not be fixed. Travelers had to continue their trip with no wagon. Their friends shared their supplies with them. It was very hard to get the wagon over the mountains. In some jagged places, the traveler pulled the wagons up with ropes. They lowered them inch by inch on the other side. Some people had to empty their wagons and take them apart. They carried the pieces and their belongings across the mountain, then rebuilt the wagons. Travel graves. Many travelers got sick. Some got well, but others died. Their friends and family buried them by the trail. Fort Laramie is the title of this page. Native Americans met fur traders at Fort Laramie. They traded animal skins for guns, traps, and food. After walking for 7 weeks, the travelers reached Fort Laramie, Wyoming. They found supplies, stores, offices, and place to rest for a few days. Native Americans lived outside the fort. They came to trade with the travelers. And here we are at the fort. We can see the Native Americans, the soldiers of the fort, the buildings, the trading company. Here's a picture of the trade store. The store sold pots and pans, food, and tools to repair wagon wheels. Passing through. When they arrived at Fort Laramie, travelers signed a book. That book showed that 9,000 wagons with 40,000 men, women, and children passed through the fort. At Fort Laramie, the travelers wrote letters to their families. They sent them back with fur traders who were heading east. Fort Laramie was less than halfway to Oregon. From the fort, the Oregon Trail began winding up the Rocky Mountains. This page is titled Clothing. There was no place to buy clothing on the trail. Before they left home, pioneer women sewed clothes for the whole family. They bought needles and thread on the trip to mend torn pants. Dust and dirt. Clothes were washed in water from the streams. They were hung on the wagons to dry. As the wagon rolled, dust stuck to the wet clothes, making them dirty all over again. Clothes were washed and scrubbed by hand in tubs of water. There's a mother, and she's got her water bucket out there and a washboard, and she's working fervently to try to get the clothes clean. Women and girls had 2 or 3 dresses, a shawl, a bonnet, a scarf, an apron, and a couple of nightgowns. Men and boys had 2 or 3 pairs of pants, a few wool shirts, a scarf, and a hat or cap. Some men had jackets too. Everyone wore strong leather boots or shoes. New footwear. Some pioneers got leather moccasins from the Native Americans. They found the moccasins to be quite comfortable. When it got cold, travelers put on an extra layer of clothes. They're getting closer to the mountains there, and the temperature is dropping low in the night and through the early morning. Do you see right here at the bottom? There's a skull. Let me see if I can get it up here for you. There it is. A skull of an oxen that died on another trail. This page is titled Food. Pioneers carried dry foods such as rice, flour, beans, potatoes, and coffee. These would not spoil on the journey. Along the trail, men and children went fishing. Men also shot birds, deer, and sometimes buffalo. Women cooked the animal meat over a fire, or they added it to a pot of stew with onions and potatoes. Most families cooked over a fire. Here's a typical menu: breakfast, coffee, bacon, bread, or pancakes. Lunch, cold, dry meat. Dinner, bacon and beans or buffalo stew. And here we are, they're cooking a big old piece of meat on the fire, and they've got their pots cooking probably stew and vegetables and who knows what else. This page is titled Oregon Trail Recipe, Bacon Stew. Follow the instructions below to make a stew of bacon, beans, and rice as pioneers did in 1850s. Pioneers started with dry red beans and cooked them in water for 2 hours. This recipe used canned beans. It makes enough soup for 4 helpings. Warning: do not cook anything unless there is an adult to help you. Always ask an adult to use knives, the stove, and to handle hot food. Here's what you're going to need. You will need 1 cup, 240 grams of rice, 2 cups, 480 milliliters of water, 1 small onion cut up, 2 tablespoons of oil, 1/2 teaspoon salt, 1/4 teaspoon garlic powder, a dash of pepper, 4 slices of bacon, 1 16-ounce 32-gram can of red beans. And now you follow the steps. Step 1. Put 2 cups of water in a pan. Add 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Bring the water to a boil. Number 2. Add the rice to the boiling water. Lower the heat and cover the pan with a lid. Cook for about 20 minutes until all the water is gone. 3. In another pan, heat the oil. 4. Cook the beans in the oil until cook the onions. Cook the onions in the oil until the pieces are almost clear. Number 5. Pour the beans into a strainer and rinse them with water. Number 6. Mix the beans into the onions. Add the rest of the salt and pepper and garlic powder. Heat for 10 minutes. Number 7. Fry the bacon in a skillet until it is crisp. Remove the bacon and break it into pieces. Mix the pieces with the beans. Number 9. Spoon the bean mixture over rice, mix together and serve. And here you go. You can see it. Looks good, doesn't it? This page is titled Oregon at Last. Here we are looking at a picture of the campers, and someone's got himself a really nice bird. Mom and Dad and all the children are looking at it. Must be Big Brother got that one. On one of the last nights on the trail, people tried to imagine their new life in Oregon. After many long months, the tired travelers finally reached Oregon. They were delighted to see cabins with smoke puffing from the chimneys. There were crops growing in the fields. There were grown-ups working and children playing. These were the families who had arrived earlier. The long trip was over, but there was much work to do. Families needed to build cabins and barns. They had to chop trees to clear and plant in a field. For the first few years, children were too busy to go to school. Where to stay? While they built their houses, some travelers stayed with friends, others lived in tents, some had to stay in their wagons for several more months. The travelers arrived. Some had buried their parents and grandparents on the Oregon Trail. Some gave birth to new babies. All of them made friendships on the trail that would last the rest of their lives. Here they are pulling into Oregon. What a great day this is for sure. Are they happy? Yes, they are. The last page of the story is entitled Oregon Grows. The travelers settled into the land. They built their houses and farms. Then they built schools, stores, and churches. Towns such as Portland, Oregon, grew into large cities. Wagons rolled into Oregon through the 1880s. Thousands of wheels rolled over the Oregon Trail. Today you can still see the ruts they left in the dirt. The busy towns set up by pioneers had a hotel, a bank, and many stores. In the 1850s, people began traveling west in stagecoaches. There's a stagecoach right now that just pulled into town. What an amazing story. I'm glad you followed me through the Oregon Trail. We had a good time, didn't we? Let's not forget the glossary. Cabin, simple, small house, often built of logs. Canvas, thick material usually made from cotton. Crops, plants grown to provide food. Fort, strong building to protect people from attacks. Fur traders, people who exchange objects or money for animal skins. Guard, someone who protects or keeps watch over people or a place. Guide, person who leads travelers on a journey or trip. Oxen, strong animals related to cows, used to pull wagons or farm equipment. Pioneer, someone who does something or goes someplace first to make it easier for others to follow. Plains, wide open areas, flat or gently rolling land. Prairie dog, squirrel-like animal that digs and lives in underground tunnels. Rocky Mountains, longest group of mountains in the U.S. stretching from Alaska to Canada and down to Mexico. Slate, writing surface used in schools similar to a small blackboard. Spoil, to become rotten. Stagecoach, box-like cars pulled by a horse that people rode into travel long distances. Trade, to exchange one thing for another. Wagon train, group of covered wagons that travel to the west together. I'm Don Fox, and I am happy that you came with us on the Oregon Trail. I'm here at Linda Elementary School in beautiful Linda, California.